All right, why don't I start with a description of the problem we're having, and then we can talk about the things that we're doing to try to correct the problem. Okay, the problem is we now know 5,100 voters are confused. 5,000 is a huge number, and I am deeply worried about it. What voters did in these circumstances, and it's the fault of the form, the state form that they were given, that so many people made this exact same mistake over and over. What they did was the application for ballot by mail is a kind of a long envelope looking thing that's on cardstock. You fill it out, staple it or tape it together, and then mail it in. And on part of the form, section 6A, it has several options for the voter to ask for different kinds of ballots. For example, we know that there is a primary runoff ballot for both the Dems and the Republicans. And then on top of that election, we also have the District 14 special election. They have been put together. It is usually against the law to put anything with a primary election. It's not a good idea. And yet we're trying to make these two elections cooperate with one another when they have a lot of basic incompatibility. So we start with that. When voters asked for a ballot by mail, and we have mega times over the amount of by mail ballots than would be normal for a primary runoff election. In fact, we're at presidential levels for this little runoff election. 31,000 people have already asked for a ballot by mail, and that grows every day. The issue with what's happening to voters is they are sending in an application that's incorrectly marked. And what they've been asked to do is, on 6A in the form, it says, primary election, Democrat or Republican. Well, voters looked at that and they said, well, the primary was March 3rd, so it can't be that election. They took it very literally. It can't be that election. So they dropped down to the next line that says checkbox for other. And sometimes they write in District 14, or sometimes they just check other, or they'll check way down at the bottom. There's an out of sequence item that has provide subsequent runoff, or sign up for subsequent runoff elections. Some people, the problem that we're having is that a lot of voters checked the other box, indicating that they wanted a ballot by mail, but didn't tell us, yes, they wanted a party primary ballot, and didn't tell us which party. So we could not send them anything. Unless they were living in the District 14 boundary. And if that's the case, then when they checked other, what the voter was telling us was, send me District 14. So there are a whole bunch of people out there who did not get, we didn't know to send them a ballot for the primary runoff. We only just discovered when we were working on Sunday the extent. We knew there was hundreds and hundreds, but there's thousands of people who've made this mistake. So what we are trying to do is see if there's a way we can correct it, if we can assist voters in some of the solutions. The solution that I have put out there, which is a perfectly good one, is for the voter to keep that ballot that they've asked for, don't throw it away, take it with them to the polls, and surrender it to the election judge once they get inside. Then that'll be canceled and they will start over with a fresh, regular ballot that will count. Now, if you've lost or misplaced your ballot by mail, or perhaps you didn't get it, then the same solution is available to you. The only difference is you will be voting on a provisional ballot instead of a regular ballot, but that provisional ballot will count once it arrives at ballot board if there's not an already voted by mail ballot in there. Okay, so you can't vote twice. If you're trying to get the full ballot, the primary runoff and the special district together so that you vote on both of them, then surrender that by mail ballot. and go ahead and just plan to start over. Now, I recognize that undermines the whole purpose that a lot of people were using for voting by mail, and that was that they didn't want to have to go inside the polling place. Polling places don't look at all like what they used to look like. It looks very different today. The machines are at least 6 feet apart. The people are kept apart. There's PPE for the voters. There's shields for the most involved stop points in the voting process. It's nothing like what you've seen before. So I think there is a great deal of safety that we can provide in saying, I'm sorry we've had this problem with by-mail ballots, but you can still vote the whole thing. All you have to do is turn up in person. Now, we have some people, though, who are, in fact, not able to access that solution. They're out of town for the entire period, or they are disabled, or, for reasons that are known to them, they will not go to inside a polling place to vote. There are no other options other than for us to try to consider if there is a way for us to send the voter a supplemental correction ballot, so that we can tell them, we know you already voted on this, but you didn't get this ballot. Mark it and send it back to us ASAP. That's what we're trying to figure out today, if we can do. It's fraught with all kinds of, potential problems, because sending out 2 ballots to a person and then the idea of bringing them back in and putting them together, that's a lot to consider. But we've got some people working on it right now to see if there's a way our vendor can program it so that we're protected from people voting twice. But voters that did want to vote by mail can do that. I don't have an answer for you yet. Right now, the only answer is go inside. Take your ballot with you and go inside. And we're working on if there can be anything else we can help with. The deadline for that is midnight tomorrow. If I can't get this thing together and out the door by midnight tomorrow, then it is too late to help the 5 voters who've got this mistake. So let me just hold it there. If people have not gotten their ballot by now, there's only a few, they come in by the hundreds every day, and we try to turn them around. So the ones that came in on Friday and today, we're holding until I can figure out if I can send them a supplemental ballot. For any new people that are just now asking for a ballot, we're pretty much turning those around within 48 hours. So you should have already gotten your ballot. If you didn't get it, then call the office of the county clerk at 238-VOTE and let us check your tracking. I have heard that a lot of people haven't gotten their ballot. I also heard this early on when voters weren't exactly figuring out the timing for this election. In other words, the March 3rd was a long time ago that we had the first election, and this runoff being delayed until July meant that we did not have a ballot to send out to voters until after May 15th, after the filing period for the special election. So so all of those months were waiting because there was nothing ready. And so then once it got ready, then we cleared out the almost 31,000, and we've probably got about anywhere from maybe 500 to 800 ballots right now that we're going to hold for 24 hours until we can figure out, can we send them an extra ballot, or do we need to do something else? So that's where it is right now.
This gentleman actually applied at the same time his wife did. His wife got the ballot, already sent hers back. He's still waiting to receive his.
I'd say that's a problem.
Yeah. So does he go and cast the provisional? Would you recommend at this point that he does that?
What I think he should do is I think he should check the tracking. Let's find out really and truly, did his get mailed? It was probably, it doesn't have to be mailed at the same time, but if they came in together, the batch would have probably gone out together. So that tells me something's wrong. Mm-hmm. It may be lost in the mail, and I'm not picking on the post office. It's just that they are completely overwhelmed, and it's possible it got misrouted someplace else. So call 238-VOTE, and that's 512. Ask to check your tracking, and we know this is going to generate hundreds of calls. Fine. We would rather get you, clear about what you need to do than have you sit out there and wait around for something that may have bumped into some sort of obstacle.
Tell us again the deadline to get our ballot back to you. What is the deadline?
Okay, I understand some bad information was given out that Bruce didn't quite get it right. I'm so very sorry. I'm the expert in ballot by mail, so I can absolutely answer ballot by mail questions. It is a two-part answer. The answer is, if your ballot arrives, and this is what everybody should be striving for, arrives in the county clerk's office by 7 p.m. when polls close on election night, then it is absolutely timely and counted. The rest of the answer to that question is, if we receive a ballot 1 or 2 days later that has the postmark of election day on it, we can accept it. Those are considered late by mail ballots. So the answer is, if you can make sure it's postmarked by election day, then and it gets here, within about a week, it'll be counted as a late ballot by mail. I think that's the best answer. There's 2 answers to that question, and I think y'all only got the first half.
Gotcha. That makes sense now. That totally makes sense. You can drop off your ballot, correct, in person?
No, you cannot.
I cannot lock it in. Maria told us.
Let me explain. No. Yeah. Okay. So here's the difference in what we're actually saying, because we want to be really clear with the message.
Please
okay.
do.
For states that have by mail voting for everybody, they have built into their systems places where they can drive up and drop off, almost like in a mailbox, drop off their ballots. Texas does not have that. Don't try to just drop your ballot off. Instead, what you have to do is bring the ballot in, surrender it, get it canceled, is really the only way to make sure that you get timely that ballot canceled out and your vote in. So don't be thinking, I know some people have even talked about curbside voting. Curbside voting is a very tiny, easily overwhelmed program that is meant exclusively for ADA people who cannot get out of the car. It's not a good idea for regular voters to consider that an option, because it puts them in the position of they don't qualify. Unless you are absolutely disabled to the point where you cannot get out of the car, then you don't qualify for curbside voting. And I know we've had a lot of people out there say, oh, just drop it off curbside. Nope. You have to go in and make official surrender. Okay.
So there is no provision for me to drop off my mail-in ballot at the airport office. There's no way to do that.
No.
Okay.
No. By mail ballots have to be mailed. And I was just clicking through my head here to think if there was any other exception that we might know about. If we have hospital people that are COVID, there is the hospital ballot option. But that's, again, a really tiny population, and you're going to call and we're going to help you work it through.
Okay.
So no, there's no way to drop it off. It's not legally allowed in the state of Texas. You must go inside and surrender it.
Okay. Any thoughts about how we move forward with this? I think there's been some concern about what's this going to be like for November if this.
Oh yeah.
I know this was a particularly difficult one, so this isn't meant to be a blame thing. But are we going to rethink this form? Are we going to rethink the process? Or where are you on that? And I know you're in the midst of dealing with all this stuff right now.
Exactly. Well, it's the state form that we are required to use, and I don't think it's a very good form at all. I see exactly why voters made these mistakes. So I'm going to put some pressure on the Secretary of State's office to update and make that form more readable for voters, so that we don't have thousands of people making the same mistake because of the poor design of the ballot by mail request form. So that'll be a lesson learned. In fact, the July 14th election is becoming a lengthy list of lessons learned about how voters respond, what works best, what kind of messaging works best to protect them and get them to use their PPE. all of those issues are all about lessons learned for November. And this is a small election, so it gave us an opportunity to really look at our procedures. And quite frankly, this problem with ballot by mail, I'm glad we found it now, because I don't want anybody to have to go through this kind of mistake in November. So there will be quite a bit of pressure on the Secretary of State to upgrade and correct that form so that it gives voters a chance to ask for what they really want, which is 2 different elections at the same time. So big lessons learned there. That's that. In other words, that's patently obvious is what I'm trying to say. That we know that's an issue, and so we can fix that. Making sure that everybody understands which items are available to them and which items might get them in trouble. And by items, I mean programs. Yes, you can go inside. Yes, you can vote by mail, but no, you can't use curbside. And no, you can't just drop your ballot. So we want to make sure people get the right message, and ballot by mail is complicated. It is not voter friendly. It never has been. Most states that do this kind of program take years to build up all of their, support structures and educate voters. And we did nothing. Other than what voters have heard from the news, they've received nothing else. So that's not the way I would recommend running it.
Lynn, that was my list. Do you have anything else?
Okay. Well, yeah, about Michelle's going forward question.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of people upset at me because I talked over 200 people into doing this, and I'm getting dinged every day about it. But I'm telling them that if they marked annual application, they will get the November ballot for sure.
That's true.
Okay, well, so
saving those, putting them aside, yeah.
So, but they're going to look at me and go, I don't remember if I checked it or not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Rather than having everybody call you, can I get a spreadsheet for my precinct or something of who is good to go for November? Just be thinking about that.
That's something that we can check after the election when it's a little clearer who's in and who's out. The other thing is that because a lot of these people are going to be now asked to submit a corrected ballot, getting towards the last days of voting, I want to make sure that I get the word out fast enough so that they can have time to get their new ballot and then put it back in the mail to us. So it's complicated. I wish they hadn't made the mistake, but I completely see how that happened because of the form. And it's not a small amount of people either.
So and then I got an email today about somebody just had the SD14, and I said, well, you can take it in and surrender it. And it was, forget it. That's not why we did it. We'll either.
I know. Which is why we're trying to find some other way to help these voters.
Okay.
But the system isn't designed for voters to get 2 ballots. And so we're really working against one of the fundamental principles. And can we, with proper programming, select out the ones who need to get that second half of the ballot that they didn't get the first time around? Can we get it to them and then get it back to us in a way that prohibits double voting, and makes it as easy for them to understand, and as quickly as possible we can rectify their mistake on this ballot by mail application. We're trying to find a way to help them.
Okay, well, and at this point, people are getting anxious anyway.
I know.
Gotten their ballot. So the people that are willing to go ahead and go to the polls, I'm telling them to go.
Yeah, go ahead and go. And if you've not gotten your ballot, we're not holding anything other than just this Friday and Mondays until we see what we can do with them. Everybody else has already gone out in the mail. So if you didn't get your ballot, something's wrong.
Well, we've got that in my house. So my husband hasn't gotten his, and mine's been mailed back in. So
let's check you. Let's check him rather.
Okay, I'll do that.
I know it's phone calls, but let's do it now. Have people call now.
And then I'm getting questions about data. For a while we started assuming, well, they'll know they have to send us the Dem ballot if we voted Dem in the primary. So somebody has theorized that it's the two systems. You've got like maybe an old school system checking the applications that doesn't talk to your voter base, because they walked in and before even saying that they needed a Dem ballot, the poll worker knew that they did.
That's in person. That's in person. And all right, in person, it's a lot easier to make it clear that you want both ballots. And the presumption is if you show up that you are going to get both ballots. The presumption should have been in the by-mail program that everybody checked which ballot they wanted, and we would have responded to it. But without an affirmed wet ink signature asking for a party ballot, then no, you do not send them, because the presumption is the voter knows what they want to vote on, and if they wanted to ask for it, they would have asked for it. That's current law. So it really does matter what you write on that form, and there's very little leeway for us to second guess that a voter might also want a primary ballot if we go and double check, which primary back on March 3rd they voted in. But you can't make the assumption that, by law, I can't make the assumption that voters want a primary runoff ballot if they did not ask for it. And it's even a bigger assumption to make that, if they didn't ask for it and they did vote in the Democratic primary, then should I turn around and send them a Dem ballot? You can't cross over. But it's an assumption that they want that extra ballot. And I have no signature requesting it. When you're standing there in person, you're requesting it, and you carry the of yourself, okay? By-mail doesn't offer them that unless they fill it out correctly. And again, by-mail voting is not voter friendly.
Right. Well, but then in the newspaper now, they're asking me about, a couple days ago when it was in the paper and it said Dana had asked and the state told her no. And then next paragraph,
yeah, I know.
Bastrop County was going ahead. Yeah. And so I've gotten questions.
That's right. Which is why I kind of wish I hadn't said that, but I was telling the truth at the time. They shot me down. They would not let me take action that I thought I could take. And then I found out that the next door Republican county was doing it. And it was like, well, then Travis County can do it too. So it changed my trajectory to say, okay, what can I do besides just requiring these people to go in person? And that's what the scramble yesterday and today is all about, is trying to figure out how can we treat all the voters the same. Everybody gets both ballots, even if they didn't ask for it. And how can I move that and preserve every record? We're optimistic that we're going to find the solution, but the clock is ticking. We have to make our final decision within the next couple of hours.
Okay.
So we'll know something by the end of today, where we're going with this?
Probably first thing in the morning, because our end of today may be at 10 o'clock tonight.
Gotcha. Okay.
We're trying to figure this out.
Okay. Well, we don't want to keep you from your scramble, but I have people that will want to help after this is done, as sort of citizen input about helping with the mistrust, because I understand that vote by mail, the biggest obstacle is mistrust, and now they don't trust me at all about it. So
and I feel badly about it too. If I could foresee that people were going to interpret that primary election box checkoff, that category for checkoff, we could have immediately started sending out both ballots, just like Bastrop County did. But it didn't occur to us until there was already tons in that people were asking for just a District 14 election erroneously. And so we went back and did of all the people who had voted by mail, there are about 5,000 who have made this mistake. And our question is, in the middle of the moving parts, because while we're trying to deal with the mail back into us and then back out to them, voters are also crossing over and going to the polling place to cure the problem themselves, which is the terrific thing to do. But for those who still want to vote by mail because they don't want to or can't come inside the polling place, we're trying to adjust that so they get that ballot. And yes, I'm going to know by, maybe midnight tonight. If we've got programmers analyzing it, and we just have to be extraordinarily careful that we don't create a situation where some voters get treated differently than other voters, and that some voters, manage to find a way to vote twice. We can't let that happen either.
I'm curious about two things, Dana, and this is like really forward looking. One is it possible to do a kind of like you do a voter lookup? Could you do a lookup based on whether you have an active application for vote by mail?
Well, we're behind schedule getting a new voter registration system. And because it's delayed, it will not be available to us for this election or the next one in November, unfortunately. Our new voter registration system will take our internal tracking information about by mail and open it up so the general public can see it. I wished I'd have had that a long time ago. I should have had it a long time ago. We're waiting for it. So the next thing, which is why I'm telling people, go ahead and call us, because we can look at the internal tracking. By next year, we do hope that that system will be up and running, if, unless we can do it sooner. But that ability for voters to check their own tracking will be hugely helpful in promoting confidence, but also just making sure that voters know exactly what's going on.
And the other thing I was curious about, is there a way to build some sort of front end to where you're asked a series of questions and then the form is filled out, kind of like TurboTax for vote by mail?
No, although we should have it. Here's the issue. There's no, Texas doesn't support voting. We just don't. And so the fact that they would have this required paper form with a required wet signature is part of the problem. There is no electronic interface. That would have been called electronic voter registration. And that's failed now in the last 3 sessions. It should not have. We should have the ability to be able to, ask for the proper support of our system in tracking people down and giving them information. As long as Texas carries this attitude of voter obstruction and a reluctance to expand the franchise with proper security of ballot by mail voting, we're going to get this extremely high ballot by mail volume coming in without any of the plans or the protocols to handle that heavy a load. We've predicted it, and so we were able to buy some additional equipment, hire extra crews to get a ballot contract, all of those, so that we could handle not only this presidential level of ballot by mail that we're receiving from the runoff, but also so we would be ready for November. If there was a way electronically there is a way to do all of that electronically. Other states do it. Texas prohibits it.
Okay. So if we have 31,000 ballot by mail out for this little primary runoff,
yes,
what are you expecting for November? What numbers are you expecting?
Well, it'll be more than that, but previous presidential numbers were already at this rate. So we could see, as it gets a little closer and I'm able to look at some polling and hear some comments from voters about whether or not they liked the by mail process, because it's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be a last ditch save your right to vote. So when we get to processing all of the things that we noticed that we've learned from this election, I hope that will be one of the things that I can figure out for the future, is just how many by mail ballots do I think I'm going to get in. If I make a stab at a guess and say, well, because it's 31 now, it's very likely to be 50,000 in November, I can go into it thinking that, but I'd like to have some better data.
Okay. All right. That does it for us. I appreciate your time, and thanks for clarifying. I think you set the record straight on a couple of really important issues, and just encourage people to vote safely and vote in person right now.
Vote safely by mail. You can do it, and we're going to try our best to help these 5,100 people. And I think what we do is we just send the word out. We've got a high error rate from voters, and we're trying to figure out how to help them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let us
Thank
know
you.
how it
And
goes.
Lynn, thank you for your offer of tracking down your neighborhood. That's great.
Yes. Well, and actually I've got an email. I'll let the woman who was so frustrated and said then she probably won't even bother to vote. I will tell her, hold on, we may have news for you in the morning. You may get a corrected ballot.
And we will probably run it through the parties rather than through the statesman.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your hard work.
Well, thank you too for watching over this. I'm just so impressed at y'all's volunteerism. It's just really wonderful.